Captain Underpants and the Big Bad Battle of the Bionic Booger Boy, Part 2, The Revenge of the Ridiculous Robo-Boogers, the 7th epic novel by Dav Pilkey. This is the Part 2 series, and if you haven't watched Part 1, you can click on this card to watch it, and let's go right into it immediately. Hi everybody, and welcome to the second half of Captain Underpants and the Big Bad Battle of the Bionic Booger Boy. This comic book should give you a pretty good update of our story so far. The sad truth about Captain Underpants. Once upon a time, there were two cool kids named George and Harold. They're mega groovy. Me too. But unfortunately, they had a mean principal named Mr. Crub. Blah blah blah. So one day, they hypnotized him with a 3D hypno ring. You will obey our every command. Yes, masters. Mr. Crub became under their control. You're now a monkey. Ha ha ha. Hoo hoo hoo. But they made a terrible mistake. You're now Captain Underpants. Okay. Ha ha ha. Tra-la-la. It was funny until he jumped out the window. Hey, come back here. No way. Mr. Crab really thought he was a real superhero. He got in all kinds of trouble. Oh no. One time he almost got killed by a dandelion. Help! So George stole some superpower juice from a UFO, and he gave it to him. Glub glub glub. And Mr. Crab got superpowers. Now he can fly and stuff. Here we go again. Now whenever Mr. Crab hears somebody snap their fingers, blah blah blah, he turns into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la. And whenever Theo gets water on his head, Theo is Captain Underpants, he turns back into Mr. Crab. Blah blah blah. So remember, don't snap your fingers around Mr. Crab. But that's only the first part of our story. Read on. Okay, well, there was this other kid in our school named Melvin Sneely. I'm a dumb nerd. Melvin invented a combinable thingy that marks stuff together. First, he combined his pet hamster Zulu with a robot. Eureka! I've created the world's first bionic hamster. Next, he tried to combine himself with a robot. But he sneezed at the last second. Achoo! And he accidentally got combined with a robot and his boogers. Zap! He became the Bionic Booger Boy. I'm a dumb nerd. Uh-oh. The one time he caught a cold. Achoo! Then he got mad and turned into a monster. Then he ate up Captain Underpants. The Zulu, the Bionic hamster, beat him up. Then Melvin's parents came and reversed the combinable thingy. They zapped him and blew away the boogers. Zap! Boom! Now Melvin and Mr. Crab were safe. But something was wrong with them. I'm a dumb nerd. Blah blah blah. Then the boogers came to life and smashed the combinable thingy. Crash! And the chase was on. The end of Part 1. Now the story begins. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. This is Mr. Crab, Melvin Sneely, and Zulu the Bionic hamster. Mr. Crab is the one on the left with the underwear and the bald head. Melvin is the one on the right with the bow tie and the glasses. And Zulu the Bionic hamster is the hamster-looking one in the middle with the laser eyeballs. The Marco hydraulic jump atronic legs, the super songobulating mini auto arms, the virtually indestructible flexo gromonic endoskeleton, and the twin turbo 3000 SP5 Kung Fu titanium lithium alloy processor. Remember that now too. Alright. And these are the ridiculous robo-boogers, 3 of the vilest, most disgusting, and most terrifying creatures ever to drip across the face of the earth. Even their names are horrible, monstrous monikers the sound of which would drive madness into the hearts of the bravest of heroes. If you dare to know their nightmarishly deplorable names, I'll tell you. But don't blame me if you have to sleep with the nightlight on for the rest of your life. The names are from left to right: Carl, Trixie, and Frank and Booger. See, told you they were scary names. Carl, Trixie, and Frankenbooger each bellowed out terrifying, ear-piercing screams of unstoppable fury as they chased our heroes down the city streets. Finally, the Robo-Boogers cornered everywhere in a dead-end alley. The three legitimate fans oozed closer and closer until at last they leaped toward their prey. The situation had become so frightening that George, Harold, Melvin, and Mr. Crab closed their eyes tightly and waited for the terrifying sounds of their own inevitable demise. Globble, globble, globble! But instead of fearing inevitable demise-type sounds, our heroes heard something quite different. You see, at the very last second, Zulu the Bionic cancer stretched open its flexochromonic jaw and shoved the three boogery behemoths into his mouth. Zulu's bionic cheeks swelled to capacity as he raised his fairy head toward the sky. Then, with the force of a lunar shuttle liftoff, Zulu shot the three slimy villains into space. Spit-tooey, spit-tooey, spit-tooey. The three ridiculous Robo-Boogers sailed through the sky like cannonballs. In no time at all, they left Earth's atmosphere and began sailing toward Uranus. The terrifying battle was over. Wow, that was a really quick story, said Harold. This is going to be our shortest adventure ever. Ain't that the truth, said George. Chapter 2. It ain't. Unfortunately for George and Harold, their adventure had only just begun. As everyone walked back to school, a confusing argument got underway. I want my hamster back, said Mr. Crab. Your hamster, said George. First of all, he's our hamster now. And second of all, he never belonged to you. He belonged to Melvin. I don't care who belongs to, Melvin interrupted. Hamsters aren't allowed in school, especially not in my school. I'm giving all three of you buzzes into a detention for bringing the fairy beast into your classroom. You can't give us a detention, said Harold. Just a kid like us. Suddenly, Mr. and Mrs. Neely came running toward them. Melvin, you're right, cried Mrs. Neely. So happy you're safe, son, cried Mr. Neely. Mommy, Papa, cried Mr. Crab, dashed over to Melvin's parents with open arms. The sight of a bald, grown man in his underwear running toward them made Mrs. Neely scream in horror. Hey, what's the big idea, yelled Mr. Neely. It's me, Papa, cried Mr. Crab. Don't you recognize your own son? Get away from us, you weirdo, Mrs. Neely yelled as she hit Mr. Crab with her purse. Melvin ignored the commotion as he walked past them. All went into the school. Melvin stopped the stairs and headed for the school office. Everyone except Miss Anthrope had already gone home for the day, and she was getting ready to leave too. Just where do you think you're going, woman? Shouted Melvin. Miss Anthrope turned and stared in shock at the fourth grader standing behind her. What did you just say? She cried in a voice that was rapidly becoming a scream. Who do you think you are? The guy is gonna fire your hiney if you don't get me my coffee. Now, yelled Melvin. Normally, school securities don't have the authority to hang a child from a coat hooked by his underwear. But today had been a particularly stressful day for Miss Anthrope. She had been covered in snot, carried through town by a rampaging robotic monster, and worst of all, forced to chaperone an elementary school field trip. That was payback time. Chapter 3. Mr. Melvin and Cruppy the Kid. Miss Anthrope collected her things and left for home, grumbling under her breath as she passed George and Harold in the hallway. The two boys could hear Melvin's angry shouts coming from down the hall. They went to the office to investigate. While they were getting Melvin off the hook, Mr. Crab ran into the office, sweaty and out of breath. "You guys have gotta help me," he cried. "Mom and Dad are trying to kill me. Has the road gone mad?" "Relax, Einstein," said George calmly, and put on some clothes. George and Harold had already figured out what was going on, but they tried to explain the situation to Melvin and Mr. Crab. "You see," said Harold, "after you guys got morphed together by the Combinotron 2000, we switched the batteries around and separated you. But for some strange reasons, it switched your brains around. Now Mr. Crab's brain is inside Melvin's body, and Melvin's brain is inside Mr. Crab's body." "That's a bunch of bunk," yelled Melvin. "Take a look and see for yourselves," said George. He pulled a full-length mirror in front at Mr. Crab and Melvin. They looked at themselves in astonishment. I'm a kid again," said the guy who looked like Melvin but had Mr. Crab's brain. "And I'm old and fat and bald and ugly," cried the guy who looked like Mr. Crab but had Melvin's brain. "And I have bad breath and creepy nose hairs and—" "Hey!" yelled the guy who looked like Melvin but had Mr. Crab's brain. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, "Damn, this book is getting confusing." Now, don't worry, this will all get clear by the end of chapter 17. Before now, let's rename the two characters who have the right brains in the wrong bodies, shall we? Let's call the guy who looked like Mr. Crab but has Melvin's Neely's brain, Mr. Melvin. And you'll call the kid who looks like Melvin's Neely but has Mr. Crab's brain, Crappy the Kid. Please refer to the handy X-ray chart below in case you get mixed up. Chapter 4. Things Get Worse. Crappy the Kid climbed up into his chair and demanded to know what was going to be done about this mix-up. "I could solve this problem right away if I still had my Combinotron 2000, said Mr. Melvin sheepishly, "but it got smashed in the last book." "Well, start building a new one, bub," shouted Crappy the Kid. "Okay," whined Mr. Melvin, "but it'll take about 6 months. 6 months, screamed Crappy the Kid. "I can't go around looking like a kid for 6 months. I've got a school to run, Buster." "Sorry," Mr. Melvin whimpered, "but building a circular combiner is extremely difficult. It takes time. It's not easy like building a robot or a time machine, where photo-atomic transform go belating yecto fan trip luton the can and fifth atomizer." "Hey, wait a second," said George. "Did you just say that building a time machine was easy?" "Yeah," said Mr. Melvin. "Just take a day or two." "Why?" "Well, why don't you just build a time machine," said George. "Then you can go back in time to before the Combinotron 2000 gets smashed, grab it, and bring it back to the present time." Mr. Melvin thought for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. "I've got it," he said, snapping his fingers. "I'll build a time machine, then go back in time to before the Combinotron 2000 got smashed, grab it, and bring it back to the—" "Hey, what the heck is he doing?" Snap! Everyone turned and looked at Crappy the Kid, who had just striped down to his underwear and was now tying a red curtain around his neck. "Oh no!" screamed George. "Get some water! Get some water!" Harry ran out to the drinking fountain, but he was too late. Crappy the Kid shouted a triumphant "Tra-la-la!" then turned and flew out the window. Chapter 5. Things Get Worser. Did you guys just see that?" cried Mr. Melvin. Crappy the Kid just flew out the window. He flew. "Yeah, we know," said George with a sigh. That's amazing," cried Mr. Melvin. "You must think he's Captain Underpants or something, or could it be? Could our principal really be Captain Underpants?" "Well, duh," said Harold. "But Mr. Crab doesn't look anything like Captain Underpants," said Mr. Melvin frantically. "Captain Underpants is bald, and Mr. Crab usually has hair. Hey, I know. Maybe Mr. Crab's wearing a toupee." "I thought you were supposed to be in the gifted program," said George. But how can he fly? Where did he get his superpowers?" said Mr. Melvin. "It's a long story," said Harold. Mr. Melvin calmed down a bit, walked confidently across the room, and sat in the principal's chair. leaned back and smiled at a devilish grin. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell me all about it, said Mr. Melvin. I've got all the time in the world. Chapter 6. Things get worse. George and Harold had no choice but to come clean. They told Mr. Melvin the whole story of Captain Underpants, how they had hypnotized Mr. Crow, how he drank the alien superpower juice, and how his superpowers must have somebody gotten transferred into Melvin's body along with Mr. Crow's brain. While George and Harold were talking, the smile on Mr. Melvin's face grew wider and wider and eviler. What are you smiling about, said George. This is serious. Yeah, said Harold. We're all in big trouble if we don't switch things back to normal. Correction, said Mr. Melvin. You guys are in big trouble. All my troubles are over. I, most nearly, am gonna get back into my old body, but keep those superpowers for myself. I'm gonna become the world's first superpower kid. Hey, you can't do that, said Harold. I can do whatever I want, snapped Mr. Melvin. I'm in charge now. I look just like the principal, so I'm gonna make the rules, and you guys are gonna follow them, or else. Or else what? George demanded. Or else, snarled Mr. Melvin. I'll order your teachers to give you guys 12 hours of homework every night for the next 8 years. That shut George and Harold up. Mr. Melvin's first order of the day was for George and Harold to make a new comic book about the world's first superpowered kid, Melvin Neely. Give me a really cool name, said Mr. Melvin, like Big Melvin or Mystery Melvin. Mystery Melvin, said George and Harold in disbelief. Make up a story where I defeat Captain Underpants and become the world's greatest superhero. You better not make me look stupid either, Mr. Melvin shouted. But we can't make a comic book right now, cried Harold. We've got to chase after Captain Crappy Underpants kid. You can chase after him all you want, said Mr. Melvin, after you make the comic book. Now get going. I've got a time machine to build. Chapter 7. The Purple Party. Mr. Melvin went out and bought all the things he needed to build his time machine. Now he just needed a place to build it. He wanted someplace quiet and private, someplace empty and secluded, a room that nobody ever used. I've got it, he cried, our school library. The library at Dramaworth Elementary School had once been a wonderful place of knowledge and learning. Miss Fingerbrain had begun banning most of the books. Now the library was filled only with rows of empty bookshelves and posters that warned for the potential self-realized dangers of reading. It was the perfect place to hatch an evil plan. Mr. Melvin pushed his cart into the dusty, cobwebby room and flipped on the lights. Welcome, sir, said Miss Fingerbrain. Have you come to check out the book? No, said Mr. Melvin. I need to find a large box, like a phone booth or something. There's a purple portable potty down in the basement, Miss Fingerbrain. That'll do, Mr. Melvin said. Go get it for me. I can't carry this thing up 3 flights of stairs all by myself, cried Miss Fingerbrain. All right, said Mr. Melvin. I'll help you. Mr. Melvin supervised while Miss Fingerbrain carried the heavy potty on the top of the treacherous steps. Good job, said Mr. Melvin. Now go clean out your desk. You're fired. Fired? Cried Miss Fingerbrain. What for? For the rest of her life, said Mr. Melvin. Chapter 8. Meanwhile, back in outer space, a team of scientists working at the Pequot Order of Professional Space and Interplanetary Explorers, POOPSI, were on their way to investigate the planet Durance when they came across something that was very strange. Major Bustonsky and his crew had just discovered a bizarre cluster of what appeared to be robots and tools resting on the planet's surface. The astronauts were so busy looking at their monitor that they didn't notice the 3 slimy, squishy, boogery thingies speeding toward their spaceship. Splat. Chapter 9. Ground Control to Major Tomsky. Suddenly, a very concerned voice came across the Poopsie space phone. "What's going on up there, bub?" asked ground control. "You're okay," said Major Tomsky as he zipped the cockpit's window screen for a better look. "But it appears our ship has just been splattered by 3 unidentified squishy objects." "That does it," said ground control. "This mission is just getting too strange. I want you guys to turn this ship around and come on back home." "Will do," said Major Tomsky. He pushed in the clutch, shifted the ship into reverse, and in no time at all, the Poopsie shuttle was headed back to Earth. With 3 giggling Tomaways hanging on for the long ride home. Chapter 10. Meet Mr. Melvin. The next day, Mr. Melvin was putting the finishing touches on his time machine when he heard cries of laughter out in the hallway. He opened the library door and saw a group of 3rd graders happily reading Jordan Harrow's newest comic book. Mr. Melvin stomped down the hall, grabbed the comic book out of their hands, and gasped in horror. "What the?" he screamed as he glared at the comic book's cover. Chapter 11. Captain Underpants and the War of the Wally Wonder Nerd. By George Beard and Howard Hutchins. Okay, I'll read it. Once upon a time, there was a nuclear power plant. It had a lot of waste. The waste was supposed to be taken to a dump, but one barrel fell off. The barrel rolled down a hill and landed in a cotton field. Soon the cotton soaked up the nuclear waste and began to grow. The one time the cotton got harvested. This cotton ball sure is heavy. Yeah, it's big too. They took it to the underwear factory. The cotton got made into underwear. Hey, it's glowing. Soon, look, Melvin, there is a sale on in the dark underwear. Me wants some mommy, duh. Soon Melvin had his very own pair. Now you're the coolest kid ever. Duh, I sure am. But that night, the radioactive underwear made him grow. And grow. And grow. The next morning, Melvin woke up. So he walked to school. I'm grumpy. Boom, boom, boom. Sir, a giant nurse is attacking the city. Call the army and stuff. Soon the army and stuff arrived. And there was a big war. I'm telling. Wonder Nerd picked up a tack and threw it. Oomph. Meanwhile, at a nearby school, guys are panicking. You're worthless and weak. Crash. Help. Wonder Nerd just threw a tack and squished somebody. Oh no, who was it? The gym teacher. Thank goodness. Thought it was somebody important. This looks like a job for Captain Underpants. Zoom. Hey, Wonder Nerd, quit it. I'm not a nerd, I'm cool. My mommy says so. Captain Underpants flew around and saw a tag on Wonder Nerd's undies. Warning, this underpants may shrink when washed. I gotcha. Okay, do whatever you want, but please don't dunk me in the lake. You can kill me, but please don't dunk me in the lake. I pray it. Oh yeah? Well, maybe I would dunk you in the lake. Oh heavens, no! I'll show you. No way. Get ready. Oh man. Hey, what the? My underpanties got wet. It's shrinking. Here, birdie. Hooray for Captain Underpants. Wah, tra-la-la. Jail for dumb, stupid nerds. Moral, always buy pre-shrunk underwears. Trios Comics INC. Chapter 12. Man, Mr. Melvin. Mr. Melvin was furious. He marched into the office and turned on the school intercom. George Beard and Howard Hutchins, he shouted over the loudspeakers. Meet Mr. Krupp in the school library right now. We have a library, said George. After about 20 minutes of searching, George and Harold finally came across a room they had never seen before. They entered cautiously, stepping quietly past rows and rows of empty bookshelves till they met up with Mr. Melvin. I told you guys to give me a cool name and not to make me look stupid, Mr. Melvin screamed, clutching the comic book in his sweaty hand. Oops, said George. I thought you said to give a stupid name and not to make you look cool. Yeah, said Harold. It was an honest misunderstanding. Mr. Melvin threw the comic book to the ground, then led George and Harold over to the purple potty. Remember when I had that great idea to build a time machine? Asked Mr. Melvin. Actually, said George, that was my... Well, here it is, Mr. Melvin interrupted triumphantly. And you two smarty pants are going to test it out for me. Huh? Said Harold. I'm sending you kids back in time to the day before yesterday, Mr. Melvin said. And you better not return until you've got my Combinatron 2000. Cool, said George. I've always wanted to travel through time. Mr. Melvin had a great deal of instructions for George and Harold before they left on their journey. And though the instructions were quite boring, it would have benefited the boys if they had paid attention instead of switching the letters around on a nearby bulletin board. Check out our school's big internet website at www.jhes.com. Mr. Melvin spoke at length about the workings of the time machine and the proper etiquette of time travel. You must be very careful that nobody sees you on your journey, Mr. Melvin said. They do. Just zap them with my new invention, the Forget Chamachkalit 2000. This will erase everything in their short-term memory. They won't remember ever seeing you. Mr. Melvin has also built a fake Combinatron 2000 to switch with the real one. Finally, Mr. Melvin gave George and Harold a very important warning. Whatever you do, it is very important that you don't use this time machine 2 days in a row. It needs to cool off every other day, or else it might open up an opposite dimensional reality lift that could destroy the entire planet. George and Harold started laughing at their new message on the bulletin board. Changed it to, we shake our big butts when we swim in the toilet. Hey, Mr. Melvin shouted. Have you kids even heard one word I've said? Yeah, said George. We gotta switch the thing with the thingy. And if someone sees us, said Harold, the zapping was the witch diggy. Don't worry, we got it, said George. George and Harold stepped into the purple potty as Mr. Melvin closed the door behind them. Harold set the controller for the day before yesterday. Then George pulled the chain. Suddenly, there was a brilliant flash of green light and the purple potty disappeared. Chapter 13. The day before yesterday. After a few moments of flashing lights, everything became quiet. Harold opened the potty door and peeked out into the darkened library. Cautiously, the two time travelers stepped to the library window and looked out. There they saw Melvin's father, Mr. Sneely, zapping the Bionic Booger boy with a blast from the Combinatron 2000. Been there, said George. Done that, said Harold. In the corner, George and Harold found the coat and hat which belonged to Miss Fingerbrains. Immediately, they thought of a plan. Harold put on the coat and hat and climbed onto George's shoulders. I sure hope this disguise works, said Harold. It better, said George. You can't risk letting them recognize us. Soon, George and Harold were at the scene of the action. Mr. Sneely had just fired the Combinatron 2000 a second time, and now the boys were ready to make their move. Excuse me, Mr. Sneely, said Harold, trying very hard to sound like a grown-up. I'd like to present unto you the most brilliant science guy of the whole wide world award. Really? Cried Mr. Sneely. It's always been my dream to win that award. But first, said Harold, I'd like to have a look at the Combino thingy. Okay, said Mr. Sneely. He handed Harold the Combinatron 2000 and smiled proudly. Said Harold, I need to look at it behind those bushes over there. Harold and George wobbled over to the bushes, unbuttoned their coat, and switched the two Combinotrons. Then they wobbled back and handed the fake Combinatron 2000 to Mr. Sneely. Everything seems to be in order, said Harold. Before you present the award, we'd like to get a photo of you. Sweet, asked Mr. Sneely. I'd like to get a photo of you, said Harold nervously. George stuck his hand out of the coat and held up the Forget-Shemma-Call-It 2000. Say cheese, said Harold. Sneedy looked down in shock at George's hand, and George pressed the button. Flash! Suddenly, Mr. Sneedy forgot everything that had just happened. Dazed and confused, he stumbled back and rejoined his wife just in time for the Robo-Boogers to come to life and smash the fake Combinatron 2000. Meanwhile, George and Harold were running with all their might back to the library carrying the real Combinatron 2000. That was so easy, laughed George. Yeah, said Harold. Sure got lucky this time. But when they reached the library door, George and Harold discovered that they hadn't been quite so lucky after all. Chapter 14. Miss Fingerbrains. What the heck is going on here? Shouted Miss Fingerbrains. I just got back from the lunchroom and found a portable potty in my library. Harold, said George. Zapper was the forget thing quick. Nobody's zapping anybody with anything, shouted Miss Fingerbrains. She grabbed the Forget-Chat-Call-It 2000 out of Harold's hands and yanked the Combinatron 2000 out of George's hands. I'm taking these things to the police right now, she said. Maybe they can sort this mess out. Miss Fingerbrains marched downstairs to the parking lot, got in her car, and began driving to the police station. Whoa, said Harold. You'll never catch up to her now. Sure we will, said George. All we need are some wings. Chapter 15. 65 million years before the day before yesterday. George and Harold grabbed the box of saltine crackers off of Miss Fingerbrains' desk. Then the two friends stepped inside the purple potty and closed the door. Quickly, George reset the controls and pulled down on the chain. A flash of green light lit up the room, and the purple potty vanished. Suddenly, George and Harold were transported back in time to the late Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era, a time when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Cautiously, George and Harold peeked out of the purple potty, which was now nestled precariously in the branches of a tall tree. Here, Chicky, called George. Polly, want a cracker? Polly, want a cracker, called Harold as he tossed the handful of saltines into the air. Suddenly, the two boys were swarmed by hungry pterodactyls. Before long, a friendly-looking pterodactyl, Quetzalcoatlus to be exact, swooped down and grabbed the crackers from Harold's hand. Ah, look, said Harold. He likes me. Great, said George. Let's get him into the time machine and get out of here. Carefully, Harold took the pterodactyl in his arms and carried him into the purple potty. Then, the boys closed the door behind them, reset the controls, and pulled down on the chain. Suddenly, George and Harold and their new reptilian paw were transformed forward in time to the day before yesterday. The door of the time machine swung open and the three friends sailed out of the purple potty, through the library window, and up over the town. George looked down on the city streets until finally he located Miss Fingerbrains' car. There she is, George cried. Sure love our new pterodactyl, said Harold. Got a name and crackers. Don't give him a name, said George. We're not keeping him, we're just borrowing him. George, Harold, and Crackers swooped down and landed on Miss Fingerbrains' car, which was parked at a traffic light. Miss Fingerbrains screamed in horror. Wait, cried George. There's no reason to be afraid. You're just dreaming. I'm dreaming? Is Miss Fingerbrains? Sure, think about it, said Harold. Purple potties appearing out of nowhere, kids running around with laser zappers, Pterosaurs landing on your car. This stuff only happens in dreams. Gosh, you're right, said Miss Fingerbrains. But it all seems so real. Well, trust us, said George. In a few minutes, you won't remember any of it. Before long, George, Harold, and Miss Fingerbrains were all gliding back to school with their good paw crackers. The Combinatron 2000 and the Forget-Chat-Call-It 2000 were safe once again. Soon, they arrived back at the library. I'll keep an eye on Miss Fingerbrains, said George. You take the pterodactyl back where we found him. Aw, can't we keep him? Asked Harold. No, said George sternly. He belongs in his own time. Now take him back. Aw, man, said Harold. Sadly, Harold carried Crackers into the purple potty and closed the door. After a few seconds, the time machine disappeared in a flash of green light. A half hour later, another flash of green light filled the room, and the purple potty was back. "What took you so long?" asked George. Nothing," said Harold. "Did you have any trouble taking Crackers back to his home?" asked George. Not really," said Harold. You did take him back to his home, didn't you?" asked George. Sure," said Harold, though he didn't sound very sure. Quickly, George zapped Miss Fingerbrains with the Forget Chimwell College 2000 and jumped into a purple potty. Then, with a quick flash of green light, they were gone. Chapter 16, Back to the Present. Mr. Melvin was very happy to see his purple potty return to him, and even happier to see his beloved Combinatron 2000. "Now all I need," he said with a sneer, "is to find Captain Underpants." Fortunately, Captain Underpants, you'll probably remember, looked just like Melvin Snealy, wasn't too far away. Unfortunately, he had spent the last 2 days getting himself into trouble. First, he started off by annoying some old ladies. Captain Underpants had been helping them across the street when he heard a little girl crying for her kitten, which was stuck in a tree. Captain Underpants rescued the kitty but forgot about the old ladies. "Hey!" shouted one of the old ladies. "The flying kid just left up here in this tree." "I'm gonna get that kid if it's the last thing I do," said the other old lady. Next, Captain Underpants was soaring above the football field when he encountered an unidentified flying object. It was made of brown leather and had white stitching on the side. Said Captain Underpants, "this could be a dangerous UFO." He grabbed it and flew down to the football field where, oddly, the school football team was having a big game. "I don't want anybody in panic," Captain Underpants shouted, "but I just captured this UFO. I'm going to take it to the moon where it can be safely destroyed." Suddenly, the players from the visiting team tackled Captain Underpants, which cost the home team 50 yards and the game. "That kid just made us lose our biggest game of the year," shouted Mr. Meter. "Gonna get that kid if it's the last thing I do," snarled the quarterback. Finally, Captain Underpants got on the bad side of some skateboarders in the park. They politely pointed out the no skateboarding signs, but the skateboard refused to go away. So Captain Underpants had no choice but to snap their skateboards in half with his kung fu kicking action. Then it was backing for everyone. "Dude," cried one of the skateboarders. "The little dude just dude is our dude force." "Dude," said another skateboarder. "Gonna do that dude if it's the last dude I dude." Chapter 17, The Big Switcheroonie. Mr. Melvin ordered George and Harold to stick their heads out of the window and call for Captain Underpants. Soon, the waistband warrior appeared. Mr. Melvin welcomed the caped hero inside and asked him to pose for a photo. "Why, I'd be delighted," said Captain Underpants. "Great," said Mr. Melvin. "Put these clothes on and stand over there." At first, Captain Underpants was reluctant to put on clothes, but he finally agreed. Mr. Melvin, who had worked all afternoon configuring the Combinatron 2000, pressed the start button, then ran and stood beside Captain Underpants. Chapter 17, The Big Switcheroonie. Mr. Melvin ordered George and Harold to stick their heads out the window and call for Captain Underpants. Soon, the waistband warrior appeared. Mr. Melvin welcomed the caped hero inside and asked him to pose for a photo. "Why, I'd be delighted," said Captain Underpants. "Great," said Mr. Melvin. "Put these clothes on and stand over there." At first, Captain Underpants was reluctant to put on clothes, but he finally agreed. Mr. Melvin, who had worked all afternoon reconfiguring the Combinatron 2000, pressed the start button, then ran and stood beside Captain Underpants. Suddenly, two glowing lasers began encoding the DNA of the two subjects it was about to combine. Then a burst of brilliant gray light shot out of the Combinatron 2000 and formed a ball of energy between Captain Underpants and Mr. Melvin. They both slid together into the gray light and formed a giant glob of fleshy goo. The newly reconfigured Combinatron 2000 then switched polarities and began the process of separating the two human elements. The gray ball of light slowly changed to a lovely shade of pink. Zap! Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of a light, a quick puff of smoke, and it was all over. Everybody's brains were back where they belonged. Wow, that sure is a weird camera, said Captain Underpants, who now looked exactly like Captain Underpants. Can I take these clothes off now? They're bad for my image. Go right ahead, said Melvin Snealy. Now looked exactly like Melvin Snealy. Finally, it looked as if everything was back to normal. But as you all know, looks can be deceiving. Chapter 18. The Return of the Ridiculous Robo-Boogers. Just then, the Poopsie space shuttle landed at Piqua International Airport. It wasn't the smoothest of landings due to the fact that 3 robotic boogers just eaten most of the shuttle's tailfin and nearly all of its rocket thrusters. Major Tomsky and his crew had barely escaped with their lives. Inside the school library, Captain Underpants heard the astronauts' panicked cries coming from the airport. "This looks like a job for me," he shouted, and with the mighty tra-la-la, he leaped out the window and fell 3 stories to the ground. Crash! George and Harvard screamed and ran downstairs. "Captain Underpants," cried George. "Are you okay? Speak to us," cried Harold. Captain Underpants slowly lifted his head in confusion. "Mommy," he said weakly, "my train was swimming in the piano." Meanwhile, over at Piqua International Airport, Carl, Trixie, and Frankenbooger had just finished eating the space shuttle and were now starting to munch on the control tower. The 3 globby gluttons grew bigger and bigger with every enormous bite. "Come on, Captain Underpants," cried George. "We've got to save those people." "But I forgot how to fly," Captain Underpants said sheepishly. "You didn't forget," laughed Melvin Levy, was now floating above their heads. "You just lost your superpowers. But don't worry, they've been safely transferred into my body. Now I'm the world's greatest superhero." "Melvin," cried George, "those robo-boogers came back to Earth. They're attacking people at the airport. We've got to help those people." "I'm not doing a thing until you guys change the comic books," Melvin said. "And you better make me look cool this time." "But there's no time," cried Harold. "Those people need your help now." "Well, you better start drawing then, art boy," said Melvin. Chapter 19. Never underestimate the power of underwear. Jordan Harold begged Melvin to use his superpowers to save the day, but Melvin continued to refuse. Finally, Captain Underpants stepped in. "You may have taken away my superpowers," the Wastebound Warrior said, "but I still have the power of underwear on my side, and nobody can take that away from me." Captain Underpants turned and ran toward the airport. "Melvin," cried George frantically, "if you don't do something, those boogers are gonna kill Mr. Krupp." "It's not my fault," said Melvin. "You're the ones who wrote that stupid comic book about me. Now change it or else." George and Harold looked at each other. Their choice was simple. Either fight with Captain Underpants and probably die, or give in to a dark side and live. The 2 boys turned and ran to the airport. Chapter 20. Booger Brunch. George and Harold quickly caught up with Captain Underpants. Soon, they were all at the airport witnessing the carnage of the ridiculous robo-boogers. Captain Underpants shouted out a triumphant tra-la-la from below. Suddenly, the 3 robo-boogers turned toward the familiar-sounding voice. Quickly, their laser-guided eyeballs zoomed in on 3 of the heroes who had made their lives so miserable back in Chapter 1. Immediately, the robo-boogers leaped at George, Harold, and Captain Underpants, and the chase was on again. Chapter 21. Cornered. The robo-boogers continued chasing George, Harold, and Captain Underpants till at last the 3 frightened friends were concerned at a local shopping center. In a desperate attempt to save themselves, the three brave heroes began taking items from the outside sales bins and throwing them at the snarling beast. George grabbed a pair of low-fat tennis shoes and tossed them at Trixie. Trixie gobbled them up. Hara found a delicious tube of wild cherry-flavored hemorrhoid ointment and flung it at Frankenbooger. Frankenbooger swallowed it whole. Captain Underpants picked up a genetically modified organic orange-flavored orange and chucked it at Carl. Carl chewed it up with a smug grin. Suddenly, Carl's laser eyes grew incredibly large. The haughty smile on his face turned into a panicked gasp as the wet, gushy snot that covered his body began to dry up and crumble. Huge, crispy booglets shot off of his smoldering robotic endoskeleton like green popcorn. "What's going on?" cried Harold. "It's the oranges," cried George. "It's gotta be vitamin C in these oranges. It's combating the cold and flu that causes those boogers to turn evil." Carl thrashed around brutally as more and more of his disintegrating body cracked off and fell to the ground. Finally, the lights in his panic-stricken laser eyes slowly went out. He stumbled over and crashed horribly into the parking lot. Carl was dead. Chapter 22. Vitamin See You Later. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants quickly began chucking oranges at Trixie and Frankenbooger, but the two remaining Robo-Boogers had gotten wise to the power of vitamin C. They ducked, jumped, dodged, and darted, doing whatever they could to avoid being hit by the deadly oranges. "Hey, I've got an idea," said Captain Underpants. He grabbed 2 crates of oranges and ran off, while George and Harold continued flinging fruit ferociously. "Where does he think he's going?" said George. "I don't know," said Harold, "but his idea better work. We're running out of oranges." Soon, George and Harold were down to their last 2 oranges. They threw them as hard as they could, but alas, the potent projectiles missed their terrifying targets. Trixie and Frankenbooger grabbed George and Harold and dangled them above their gigantic mouths. "Well," said George, "it looks like this is the end." "Yep," said Harold. "It was nice knowing you, Paul." Suddenly, the Robo-Boogers heard a familiar tra-la-la coming from somewhere over on the next page. The repulsive Robo-Boogers dropped George and Harold and stomped over to page 130. There they found Captain Underpants standing at the top of a large novelty toilet on the roof of John's house of toilets. He was shouting tra-la-la and doing a very annoying dance, which made the Robo-Boogers very, very angry. Chapter 23. The Underpants Dance and Flip-O-Rama. We've tried to twist, mastered the Macarena, and figured out the funky chicken. Now it's time to learn the most annoying dance ever, the Underpants Dance. It's sure to irritate parents, teachers, evil villains, and kids of all ages. Follow the easy steps in this chapter and learn the Underpants Dance today. Through the magic of Flip-O-Rama, anyone can learn how to do the Underpants Dance. First, make sure you're wearing your underpants, and follow the 4 easy steps illustrated in the next 16 pages. With a little bit of practice, you'll soon be the most irritating person you've ever met. Good luck! Okay, step 1 is the wedgie wiggle. Step 2 is the toilet top tango. Step 3 is the waistband Watsuzi. Step 4 is the big butt boogie. Wait, can I unmute this? On YouTube, it's so disgusting. I can't do that actually. Step 4 is the big butt boogie. Chapter 24. Squishies Part 2. Trixie and Frankenbooger have seen enough. They couldn't stand to watch Captain Underpants doing that stupid dance 1 second longer, so they pushed down on the seat of the large novelty toilet to hoist themselves up on the roof. Unfortunately for Trixie and Frankenbooger, they have been so irritated by the Underpants dance that they hadn't noticed the 2 crates of oranges placed carefully under the gigantic toilet seat. When they pressed down, the pressure of the toilet seat crushed the orange craze, spraying delicious vitaminary orange juice all over the big, bad boogery bodies. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants watched as their monstrous arch-enemies began decomposing before their very eyes. "What happened to them?" asked Harold. "I gave them a squishy," said Captain Underpants. "It's the latest fad." The Robo-Boogers jerked around wildly as the quickly drying snot crumbled off of their smoking robotic endoskeletons. Then, after a few minutes of spinning and screaming, they slowly tumbled to the ground in two metallic heaps. Trixie and Frankenbooger were dead. Chapter 25, Big Melvin. Soon, Ingrid Ashley from Channel 4 Eyewitness News arrived at the scene. "How did you manage to destroy the Robo-Booger?" she asked. "I'll answer that," said Melvin sneakily, as he swooped in front of the cameras with rope and some old drapes that he had tied around his neck at the last minute. And he looked quite silly. Big Melvin fought those monsters with my mighty superpowers," Melvin sighed, "and destroyed them with my super smart brain." "No, you didn't," said Harold. "You weren't even here," said George. "Don't listen to those guys," said Melvin. Big Melvin, I'm the real hero here." Melvin flew above the two defeated Robo-Boogers and used his new laser eye beams to burn the letters B and M in front of the dead creatures. "It's like Zorro," said Big Melvin. "I shall sign my initials on all of my heroic handiwork. From now on, whenever you see a big BM, you think of me." "That's funny," said George. "Big BMs have always made me think of you." Melvin flew over to Captain Underpants and grabbed him by the arm. "Now," said Big Melvin, "the entire world shall bear witness to the humiliating defeat of Captain Underpants." Suddenly, George and Harold got an idea. They turned and ran back to the school while Big Melvin continued to threaten Captain Underpants. "I command you to bow down to me," shouted Big Melvin. "Never," said Captain Underpants. "You shall bow down to me," Big Melvin yelled. "I shouldn't," cried Captain Underpants. "Then," said Big Melvin, as he untied the drapes around his neck, "you feel the power of my wrath." Chapter 26, The Drapes of Wrath. Big Melvin held his drapes tightly, then smacked Captain Underpants in the tushy with them. "I command you to deny Underworld and accept the power of Big Melvin," he shouted. "No way, Pedro," cried Captain Underpants. Big Melvin smacked Captain Underpants. "Bow down to me," he commanded, "and I shall spare your life." Go jump off a duck," said Captain Underpants defiantly. Suddenly, George and Harold returned to the scene, out of breath and hiding something behind their back. "Hey, Big Melvin," shouted George, huffing and puffing. "What?" yelled Big Melvin. Harold pulled the Combinatron 2000 out from behind his back and aimed it at Melvin and Captain Underpants. "You shouldn't leave your toys lying around in the library, bub," he said slyly. Melvin shrieked in horror as Harold pulled the trigger. Blast! Blinding flash of green light shot out of the Combinatron 2000, surrounding Melvin and Captain Underpants and squishing them together. George addressed the controller to combine them both, transfer the superpowers back to Captain Underpants to separate them. "Sure hope this works," said Harold. "Me too," said George. Chapter 27. To make a long story short, it did. Chapter 28. With big underwear comes big responsibility. Big Melvin fell to the ground with a thud. Immediately, Captain Underpants began floating in the air. "Hey," cried the good captain, "I've got my superpowers back. I knew that underwear would never let me down." Never gonna let me down. George turned down South the Channel Eyewitness News team with the Forgetchemacalla 2000. Flash. Suddenly, the Channel 4 Eyewitness News team, as well as everyone at home watching the story unfold on Channel 4 Eyewitness News, immediately forgot what had just happened. The horror was over, everything was back to normal, and everyone was happy. Well, everyone except Big Melvin, that is. Wah, sobbed Melvin. I want my superpowers back. Aw, quit your whining, bub, said George. It's been a total jerk for the last 2 books. Should just be happy that you didn't get your comeuppance. Chapter 29. Comeuppance see me sometime. Soon, crowd gathered and began to recognize Melvin. Hey, cried Miss Anthro, that's the little squirt who said he was going to fire my hiney. There he is, shouted a couple of very angry old ladies. That's the little brat who left us up in a tree. He made us lose the big game, cried the entire football team simultaneously. Dudes, you're one of the skateboarders. That's the little dude who duded our dude boys a few dudes ago. Haha, laughed Melvin nervously. Maybe I'll just go home now. Get him, shouted the old ladies. Ah, screamed Melvin as he ran away, followed closely by a large group of very angry people. Chapter 30. Horror Surprise. As Melvin and his angry mob ran off into the sunset, George and Harold had just one last thing to deal with. A quick squirt of water to Captain Underpants' face was all it took to bring him back to his grumpy old self. Well, that takes care of that, said George, and the 2 boys walked back to their treehouse. As George climbed up the ladder to the treehouse, Harold became quite fidgety. Said Harold nervously. Something I should probably tell you, George. When George reached the top of the ladder and looked inside the treehouse, no explanation was necessary. Hey, said George, I thought you told me you took Crackers back to his home. I did, said Harold, back to his new home. Harold, said George sternly, can't keep a pet per dog though. Do you know how many crackers they need to eat every day? We can never afford it. I know, said Harold sadly, but look how cute he is, and he's made friends with Zulu too. Can't we keep him for just one night? Well, alright, said George. We're taking him back tomorrow. Chapter 31. The next day, George, Harold, and Zulu returned to school with Crackers tucked snugly into Harold's book bag. Together, the 4 friends sneaked back upstairs to the library, where the purple potty stood before them in all its forbidden glory. Come on, said George, let's give this baby another spin. I don't know, said Harold. Maybe we should give it a day to cool off. Nah, I'm sure it can be used 2 days in a row, said George. What could possibly go wrong? But didn't Melvin warn us not to use this machine 2 days in a row? Asked Harold. Yeah, said George. Back in chapter 12, starting with the first word in the 3rd line of the 2nd paragraph on page 77. What exactly did he say? Asked Harold. Beats me, said George. Not very good at remembering details. Well, I don't know about this, said Harold. What if our journey brings out about the end of the road as we know it? It's ridiculous, said George. It all sounds like a setup for the sequel to a really lame children's book. The 4 friends stepped inside the purple potty and closed the door behind them. George set the controller to return them to the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era, and then pulled the chain. Suddenly, an orange light began flashing wildly. Hey, I don't remember seeing an orange light before, said Harold. Then the purple potty began to shake and rock violently. I don't remember this thing shaking and rocking before either, said George. Something is wrong, cried Harold. Something is terribly, terribly wrong. Suddenly, the entire room lit up with an explosive burst of lightning, and the purple potty began to disappear in the whirlwind of electric air. The only thing that could be heard above the chaotic clatter was the sound of 2 terrified voices screaming into the unknown abyss. Oh no, screamed one of the voices. Here we go again, screamed the other. The end. That was the 7th novel of Captain Underpants. We're now halfway there. I'll continue reading 8 to 12. It will be uploaded on YouTube as soon as possible. And make sure you give me a subscribe, so it will encourage me, and it will help me grow my YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, and I hope I can see you in the next video. Thank you.